Have you ever raised a serious issue in a retrospective, had the whole team agreed it's critical, and then watched absolutely nothing happen for 6 months? This is frustrated and considered as a process failure. Now we fixed that. In last video, we looked at Quadrant 1, the things you can control. But in this video, we are tackling Quadrant 3, the legitimate problems that require support you don't control. Because here is what I want you to be absolutely clear about. These are real impediments. They generally hurt your team's ability to deliver, and ignoring them doesn't make them go away. The mistake isn't identifying organizational problems. The mistake is treating them like team-solvable problems and then wondering why nothing changes. Welcome to Quadrant 3, right? Organizational dependent issues that require escalation. So let me define this precisely. An issue belongs in Quadrant 3 if it requires leadership decision-making, budget allocation, or cross-team coordination that your team cannot command alone. And it's significant enough that it deserves formal attention. For example, your team needs another test environment because the current one creates a deployment bottleneck, right? That requires infrastructure budget you don't control. That's Quadrant 3. Another example. There is an architectural dependency where 3 teams need to coordinate a change, and those decisions happen above the team level. Quadrant 3. Another example. Your team needs a specialized tool that requires procurement approval and licensing cost. Quadrant 3. One more. You are identified a skill gap that requires hiring or dedicated training investment. Quadrant 3. So these problems are not going away because your team discussed them in a retrospective. They require someone with organizational authority to make a decision. Now, here is where most teams get stuck. They raise the issue in the retrospective. Everyone agrees it's a problem. Someone writes it down as an action item, and then it sits there sprint after sprint because the team literally lacks the power to solve it. And 6 months later, the same issue comes up again. The team feels unheard, the Scrum Master feels ineffective, and the retrospective engagement dies. This is what I call the complaining trap. The team identifies a legitimate organizational impediment, treats it like a team action item, watches it fail, and concludes that the retrospective don't work. But the problem isn't the retrospective meeting. The problem is the handling mechanism. So Quadrant 3 items don't belong in the team's improvement backlog. Remember that. They belong in the formal escalation pathway. So here is what that looks like. The team identifies the issue and categorizes it in Quadrant 3 during the retrospective. That's where the team's involvement ends. They've surfaced the problem, they've validated it matters, done. Now it becomes the Scrum Master's job to translate that issue into business impact language and escalate it to the appropriate stakeholder. Not in retrospective meeting notes, not in verbal mention. What I mean is formal escalation with documented business impact. So for example, your team raises the single test environment is creating a deployment bottleneck. In the sprint retrospective meeting, you categorize it as a Quadrant 3. After the retrospective, you translate this into stakeholder language, something like this. Our deployment cycle time has increased from 2 days to 5 days due to test environment creation across 3 teams. This delays feature delivery and creates unpredictable release schedule. Adding a second test environment would restore our 2-day cycle time and eliminate cross-team blocking. That's business impact framing. Not the team wants another environment, But this constraint is costing us 3 days per deployment and blocking multiple teams. So here's the structure every Quadrant 3 escalation should follow. 3 questions that must be answered clearly. Okay, what is blocked? Specific work or capability the team cannot complete. Second, what is the business cost? Time delays, quality impact, or team effectiveness losses measured concretely. What decision is required and from whom? The specific authority or resource needed and who can provide it. Answer those 3 questions and your escalation has what it needs to get a real response. Then you escalate formally. It could be email, Jira ticket, whatever your organization uses for impediment tracking. And you follow up with 3-touch cadence. Initial escalation, 1 week check-in, 2 week status request. And here is why this matters. If the organization doesn't approve the request, the team gets closure. They raised the issue, it was escalated properly, a leadership made a decision, the team can stop discussing it and focus energy on what they can actually change. That's completely different from raising an issue, creating an action item, and watching it die in meeting notes. One creates a learned helplessness, the other creates a functional escalation system. Okay, so now you understand the 2 quadrants that require systems. Quadrant 1 needs escalation discipline. Quadrant 3 needs escalation protocol. But what about the other 2 quadrants, Quadrant 2, the low impact stuff your team could fix but probably shouldn't prioritize, and Quadrant 4, which is the organizational constraint you can't change and need to stop discussing. Those need different handling, not systems, but judgment and facilitation skills. So in the next video, I will show you exactly how to handle quadrants 2 and 4 efficiently so they don't waste your retrospective time.